This is Jim Fetzer, your host on Authentic News right here on RBN Live, this 21st day of March 2025. Things are getting worse and worse. Ukraine has bombed a Russian airfield 435 miles from the front lines, where Russia houses nuclear bombers in the largest drone attack ever. Gateway Pundit reporting about it. The strike, Ukrainian forces, backed by Western munitions and technology, meaning the intel to guide them, struck a major Russian strategic bomber airfield Thursday with drones 435 miles from the Ukrainian front lines. The strike ignited a massive explosion, sent a huge blast of fire into the air of Engels 2 Air Base. Videos posted by Reuters showed a huge blast spraying out from the airfield and wrecking nearby cottages. It's got to have done a whole lot more damage than that. Here we have another report about it. This is from Military Watch. The Ukrainian Armed Forces on March 20th launched a successful strike on Russia's Engels Air Base, close to 500 kilometers behind Russian lines, with footage confirming the drones were used to cause a major explosion at the facility. It serves as a primary operational facility for Russian Tu-160 strategic bombers and is the only one that hosts them permanently. The primary target of the attack appears to have been a weapons storage facility, possibly hosting ordnance for the Tu-160 fleet. It remains uncertain whether the explosion damaged any of the aircraft. This is serious, can only have been done with Western intel, which Trump resumed providing to Ukraine. This will not go down well with Vladimir Putin. Meanwhile, and I regard this as virtually absurd, Trump pushes Zelensky to put Ukraine's power plants under U.S. control. In other words, look, with Ukraine making all these attacks on Russia, including on their energy sources, their oil pipelines, Putin is going to respond in kind. So Trump is having Zelensky put those targets under U.S. control so that Putin hits them. If Russia hits them, they're hitting U.S. This is just idiotic. This is about as dumb as it gets. Suggestion was part of a phone call in which Zelensky accepted Russia's offer for a mutual pause in attacks on energy targets for 30 days. This is not going to play well. U.S. President Trump has urged Ukrainian President Zelensky to hand over control of Ukraine's energy infrastructure to American companies to shield the country from further Russian attack. I just say, what are you thinking, Donald Trump? Are you trying to initiate a war with Russia? If that's your objective, then I think you're on the verge of accomplishing it. This is colossal stupidity. Meanwhile, more airstrikes hit Yemen as Houthis fire missiles at Israel. The U.S. continued its daily bombing of Yemen on Thursday as the Houthis fired more missiles at Israeli territory. Yemen's Saba news agency reported 4 U.S. airstrikes on the Hodeidah province located on the Red Sea. It's unclear if there were any casualties in the latest U.S. strike a day earlier. U.S. strikes hit a residential area in the Yemeni capital of Sinai, reportedly wounding 7 women and 2 children. Remember how Trump has been talking about we need to settle the war in Ukraine because innocent women and children are being killed? Doesn't he think about the innocent women and children are being killed in Yemen? Innocent women and children are being killed in Gaza? Where are this man's sensibilities? Where are his faculties? Has he bifurcated Ukraine from other instances of women and children being killed? They're all innocent, Donald. Start thinking straight because you don't have your head screwed on right. I am so embarrassed and ashamed of the President of the United States. Here we have a report on the real reason Trump is bombing Yemen. Just 2 days before Israel resumed the full scale of its genocide on the Gaza Strip, the U.S. began a bombing campaign in Yemen. U.S. aggression is a significant part of the recipe for endless war and devastation of the Middle East that Israeli PM Netanyahu and U.S. President Trump are cooking up. In other words, they're all for endless war. While U.S. and Israel clearly communicated about these operations, each country has presented its actions as independent of, but in cooperation with the other. Of course, this is partially an attempt to obscure the reality that Israel cannot pursue its relentless genocide in Gaza without the material support it gets from the United States. But there's another piece for Trump. He prefers to present his and Netanyahu's approach as one of independent, if allied countries acting in their own perceived interest. He likes to present the image of Israel charting its course and the U.S. pursuing its own interest, an image that crumbles the moment Trump wants Israel or anyone else to act according to his wishes. This is all very, very bad. The U.S. attention is focused not on Gaza, but on Yemen, allowing Bibi to resume his full-scale genocide, to which Trump is indifferent. Actually, he's supportive. He's enthusiastic about slaughtering innocent women and children as long as they're Palestinians. Yet, while Trump can fantasize all he wants about lounging repulsively on Gaza's beach with Netanyahu, there are American businesses that have a stake in preventing the Houthis from acting in defense of or in solidarity with the Palestinians, including, of course, interdicting shipping in the Red Sea. Meanwhile, here's a Sonar 21 sober analysis. Limitations of the U.S. Naval Air Defense System will force the U.S. to withdraw from the Red Sea. The Trump admin wrongly accuses the wretched Biden team of going soft on Yemen during the last 15 months of its administration. Biden deployed 2 separate carrier strike groups to the Red Sea, but was compelled to withdraw them when they ran out of ammunition for their vertical launching systems. These are modular multi-mission missile launchers widely used by naval forces worldwide. They have very good capabilities, but they're running out of ammunition. Only one teeny tiny problem: the vertical launching system cannot be reloaded at sea. Once a supplied quantity of missiles are fired, the ship, whether a destroyer or a cruiser, has to go to a port in order to reload. That's why they couldn't remain in the Red Sea during the Biden admin execution of Operation Prosperity Guardian. And I believe the Trump admin is going to encounter the same problem. I say advantages are to the Houthis. Meanwhile, Google imports former Israeli spies, and I say once an Israeli spy, always an Israeli spy, who automated the Gaza genocide. Unit 8200 wrote the programming and designed the algorithm that automated the genocide in Gaza and was also responsible for the pager attack in Lebanon. Now those who helped to design the architecture of apartheid are being swallowed by the U.S. tech surveillance complex. On March 18th, Google bought Israeli cybersecurity company Wiz for $32 billion. The acquisition will mark the single largest transfer of former Israeli spies into an American company. This is because Wiz is run and staffed by dozens of ex-Unit 8200 members, the specialist cyber spying arm of the IDF. That's just terrible. That's a catastrophe. That means Google has turned Israeli spy op par excellence. Very, very bad. Meanwhile, Israeli attacks kill 110 more Palestinians in Gaza as the IDF expands its ground offensive. Israeli attacks continue to pound Gaza Thursday, killing at least 110 more Palestinians since dawn, Al Jazeera reported. As the Israeli military is expanding its ground offensive in the besieged territory, Gaza's health ministry said early in the day that since Israel restarted its genocidal war on Tuesday, at least 506 Palestinians, including 200 children and 112 women, have been killed. Donald, do you hear that? We got 200 innocent children, 122 innocent women killed in Gaza because the IDF is attacking with weapons that you supplied and effort you support. A total that doesn't account for all the deaths on Thursday. Another 909 have been wounded, including 303 children and 205 women. Meanwhile, the White House, get this, the White House, Trump fully supports Israel's Gaza slaughter. Antiwar.com. While White House Press Secretary Carolyn Levitt said Thursday, President Trump fully supports Israel's renewed massive bombing campaign in Gaza, which has killed at least 200 children since Tuesday. The president made it very clear to Hamas that if they did not release all the hostages, there would be hell to pay. Unfortunately, Hamas chose to play games in the media with lives, Levitt told reporters. This is just utterly irresponsible, inaccurate, shades of Biden regime. This is not transparency. This is more lies compounded by lies. U.S. and Israel are blaming Hamas for the lack of a continued ceasefire and hostage release. But it was Israel that repeatedly violated the deal signed in January, which would have led to the release of all Israeli captives, a permanent truce, and Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. But Bibi wants none of the above. Well, get this, Haaretz. This is one of Israel's leading newspapers. Israel, not Hamas, is derailing the Gaza ceasefire and preventing the hostages' return. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu paid the asking price for Itamar Ben-Gvir's return to the government in advance. Not out of his own pocket, of course, but with the blood of 59 hostages whose fate could be sealed by the resumption of the war, which has already sealed the fate of hundreds of Palestinians, including women and children. On Tuesday, Elia Cohen, who was freed from Hamas captivity, called the renewed warfare a death sentence for the hostages. But that interests the prime minister less than his reward in the form of the homecoming of Ben-Gvir's Otzma Yehudis party. According to the statement released by Netanyahu's office, the decision to strike Gaza was made with Defense Minister Israel Katz after Hamas repeatedly refused to release our hostages, as well as its rejection of all the proposals it has received from U.S. presidential envoy Steve Witkoff and from the mediators. But Haaretz states, it must be said loudly and clearly, this is a lie. It was Israel, not Hamas, that violated the agreement. On its 16th day, the parties were supposed to begin discussing the second phase, which was supposed to end with the release of all the remaining hostages. Israel refused. Israel also broke its promise to withdraw from the Philadelphia corridor between the 42nd and the 52nd day of the ceasefire. Moreover, Israel announced it was halting the entry of humanitarian aid into Gaza and closing the border crossings. This decision, like the energy minister's decision to halt a limited amount of electricity Israel provides to Gaza, and let me add, that's especially devastating because the desalinization, taking salt out of the salt water in order to make it potable or drinkable, runs on electricity. So, in effect, by cutting off the electricity, they're cutting off drinking water to the Palestinians. Remember that rule of 3. 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food, and you're dead. It's very bad. They know what they're doing. This is genocide. Have no doubt about it. This decision explicitly violates Israel's commitment in the agreement that aid will continue entering as long as talks on the second stage are ongoing. All the proposals Hamas received from Witkoff stem from Israel's refusal to uphold its part of the deal. Consequently, the attempt to portray Hamas' rejection of Witkoff's proposals as a reason to resume the fighting is nothing but a dishonest manipulation. That's Haaretz. That's a leading newspaper in Israel calling out the lies. You're not going to get that from the White House. You're not going to get that from Donald Trump. You're not going to get that from Bibi Netanyahu. But they are lying again and again and again. Here we have an American surgeon in Gaza describing his experience when Israel restarted the massive bombing. Dr. Feroz Sidwa, an American trauma surgeon volunteering in southern Gaza. Can you imagine being a trauma surgeon in Gaza? Recounted in a statement to antiwar.com what he experienced on Tuesday morning when Israel resumed its massive bombing campaign on the Strip, killing over 400 Palestinians, including scores of women and children. Sadwa said he and the medical team at the Nasser Medical Complex in Khan Yunis operated almost exclusively on women and children. He told antiwar.com the first patient was a girl aged 3 or 4 with agonal breathing and a weak pulse, multiple shrapnel wounds to the head and face, and that he had to tell her father she would not survive. This is just awful, just awful. And Donald Trump is responsible, have absolutely no doubt about it. Donald Trump is responsible. This is grotesque. This is awful. I'm extremely upset. I believed in this man. I thought he was truly a non-interventionist. He claimed he was going to settle these wars, that it was bad for innocent women and children to die. He's done nothing but the opposite. Spy on him.
You know, I need someone. When I was younger, so much younger than today, I never needed anybody's help in any way. But now these days are gone and I'm not so self-assured. Now I find I've changed my mind. I'll open up the door. Nothing you can sing that can't be sung. Nothing you can say, but you can learn how to play the game. It's easy.
Meanwhile, Mike Whitney reports properly Iran in the crosshairs. Trump foreign policy has been reduced to imperious demands, vulgar threats, and menacing growls. I figure Trump's frustration of dealing with Putin will reach a peak just in time to coincide with the launch of a U.S.-Israeli air campaign against Iran. Will Schreiber, military analyst, writes, Trump push for a ceasefire in Ukraine has less to do with Ukraine than it does with Israel. In other words, Trump's hasty negotiations with Putin are not aimed at ending the proxy war with Russia as much as they are with shifting the front lines from the Donbass to Iran. This shift in focus has become glaringly apparent in the last week, particularly in respect to Trump's increasingly hostile statements toward Iran. On Tuesday, Trump threatened to hold the Islamic Republic responsible for any attacks by the Houthis on ships crossing the Red Sea. He said there would be dire consequences for Iran if the attacks continued. He also gave Iran's government a 2-month deadline for reaching a new nuclear deal, even though it was Trump who scrapped the original. In short, Trump is doing what many of his critics said he would do from the very beginning. He is placing his wealthy campaign donors, placating his wealthy campaign donors by crafting a foreign policy to promote their ambitious regional agenda. He's dragging the United States into a war with Iran to repay the powerful Zionists who got him elected. He would have been elected even without him. This is all terrible, terrible, terrible. Meanwhile, U.S. and Israeli officials are going to meet for consultations about Iran. This, no doubt, would be how to plan the attack. Israeli officials are expected to arrive in the U.S. early next week for high-level talks about Iran. President Trump has made several threats to Iran in recent days, and the Pentagon is developing war plans for the Islamic Republic. This is absolutely awful. Here we have, on the Iran war plan, President Trump's memo of options for dealing with Iran now include one he didn't have in his first term, full-scale war. Pentagon and company contracting documents I've obtained describe a unique joint staff planning effort underway in Washington and in the Middle East to refine the next generation of a major regional conflict with Iran. The new planning effort, sometimes referred to as the SEED, S-E-E-D project, covers everything from subtle tools like military deception right up to the rather less subtle use of nuclear weapons. The plans are the result of a reassessment of Iran's military capabilities, as well as a fundamental shift in how America conducts war. Though many in the media incorrectly dismiss the recent U.S. attack on the Houthis as little more than a continuation of what the Biden admin was already doing, the new Iran war preparation make clear the U.S. is exploring a far more aggressive approach. Following his successful assassination of Iran's top general Qasem Soleimani in 2020, Trump seemed to have taken the lesson that aggressive action is relatively cost-free. I don't think so. This is awful beyond words. Awful beyond words. Meanwhile, J.D. Vance scores a key victory in the European Union over illegal immigration. While President Donald Trump and first buddy Elon Musk continued to nab the most incendiary headlines, VP J.D. Vance is making significant headway in his own way. And in many respects, Vance has been quite successful with one of the biggest, including a top European Union leaders' agreement with Trump's VP over illegal immigration. In an interview with Politico, Denmark's Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, has apparently admitted that Vance is right, at least to a degree, about illegal immigration. There's not much the socialist Danish Prime Minister agrees on with the Trump admin. Surprisingly, though, the center-left Frederiksen told Politico that the Trump admin VP Vance was right when it comes to migration and limiting the mass arrival of foreigners. Yes, of course. Meanwhile, the Fuhrer of Germany, Friedrich Merz, in a war and spending frenzy. How much is 1.7 trillion? After more than 80 years, Germany once again has a Fuhrer who is in no way inferior to the old one in terms of mendacity and megalomania.
Eleanor Rigby picks up the rice in the church where a wedding has been. Lives in a dream, waits at the window, wearing the face that she keeps in a jar by the door. Who is it for? All the lonely people.
I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
You're listening to Republic Broadcasting Network. Real news, real talk, real people. Because you can handle the truth.
If you're an avid reader or lover of history or both, then I invite you to purchase Blood in the Ozarks by Clint Lacey. The book delves into a controversial and often overlooked chapter of the American Civil War, specifically focusing on Union war crimes against Southern sympathizers and civilians in occupied Missouri. It centers on the massacre that took place on Christmas Day, 1863, in Ripley County, Missouri, where Union Major James Wilson's 3rd Missouri State Militia Cavalry
Not just anybody. Help! You know I need someone. Help! When I was younger, so much younger than today, I never needed anybody's help in any way. But now these days are gone and I'm not so self-assured. Now I find I've changed my mind and open up the doors. Help me if you can, I'm feeling down.
We got more developments, of course, in domestic politics. Trump strong arms a law firm into giving millions in pro bono work to anti-Semitism task force. This is outrageous. In other words, he's spending millions or talking a law firm into devoting millions, the equivalent, in order to deny Americans of their freedom of speech under the First Amendment, just the opposite of the solemn oath he took to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic. President Trump on Thursday boasted about strong-arming a major law firm into giving $40 million in pro bono legal services to his presidential task force to combat anti-Semitism and other mutually agreed projects. This is Paul Weiss, Rifkin, Wharton, and Garrison LLP, a Manhattan-based firm with a notable list of Democratic clients. How about that? Today, this is a statement from Trump. Today, President Donald J. Trump agreed to withdraw his March 14, 2025 executive order regarding the Paul Weiss, Rifkin, Wharton, and Clausen law firm, Paul Weiss, which has entered into the following agreement with the president. Paul Weiss agrees that the bedrock principle of American justice is that it must be fair and nonpartisan. Our judicial system is betrayed when it's misused to achieve political ends. Paul Weiss affirms unwavering commitment to these core ideas and principles and will not deny representation of clients, including in pro bono matters and support of nonprofits, because of the personal political views of individuals and lawyers. It goes on. This is, in my opinion, not good. Meanwhile, we have a judge threatening Trump with consequences for his actions to keep Americans safe from violent criminals. A federal judge appointed by former President Barack Obama is now threatening President Trump with consequences if he doesn't do exactly what he says. U.S. Judge James Boasberg has been in headlines lately after he demanded the return of more than 250 gang-banging illegal aliens deported to El Salvador last weekend. Judge Boasberg went so far as to order whatever planes were already in the air to be turned around. Boasberg specifically sought to prevent the Trump admin from using the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 to deport illegals who pose a threat to the country's national security. Luckily, the pilots did not get the message before they landed, so 250 violent gang members, mostly from Tren de Aragua, were locked away in a maximum security prison in El Salvador, and the Trump admin did not have to follow this ridiculous ruling. Meanwhile, it turns out the judge who blocked the deportation flights was neck deep in the Russiagate hoax. How about that? Are we surprised? The Obama judge who blocked President Trump's deportation flight last weekend played a central role in the Russiagate collusion hoax. Within hours of Trump invoking the 200-year-old Alien Enemies Act to expedite their deportation, Judge Boasberg moved to block the president and even ordered the planes to return. According to a report from journalist Jerry Dunleavy, Judge Boasberg was heavily involved in the Russiagate collusion hoax used to belabor President Trump during his first term. It was one of the bases of an impeachment of Donald Trump. Outrageous. You're getting a sense of how deeply the Democrats have politicized our judicial system. Meanwhile, rogue Soros-funded NGO plots a multi-city assault on Tesla as domestic terrorism escalates. Well, this is zero hedge. While the FBI investigates far-left terrorist attacks against Tesla, service centers, showrooms, supercharging networks, and vehicles, the radical Soros-funded nonprofit Indivisible is preparing to launch a multi-city offensive against the American company in the coming days. Anti-DEI crusader Robbie Starbuck explained more about the rogue nonprofit with Soros money. Over the next few days, you're going to see an organized professional protest effort at Tesla stores put together by a group called Indivisible. George Soros Foundation has given Indivisible nearly $8 million for their activism. Pathetic, disgusting. Soros is a guy who's wanted in many states for treason. He's committed treason here. He should not be out there walking around. Outrageous. Meanwhile, University of California system ends forced DEI statements for new hires. In other words, you don't have to make a statement that you endorse and support the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion. The University of California system has announced it will no longer require a forced diversity statement for new hires. A letter from Catherine Newman, provost of the 10-campus system, told top university officials the Board of Regents has directed President Drake to take action to ensure that diversity statements are no longer required for new recruitments. Excellent. The Board of Regents, concerned that forcing diversity statements could lead applicants to focus on an aspect of their candidacy that's outside their experience or prior experience, determined the announcement was necessary in the past. Well, determined the announcement of its discontinuation was necessary. Meanwhile, the O'Keefe Media Group, MGM Casino marketing director, says he's not going to hire whites. A casino marketing director for MGM Resorts in Springhead, Massachusetts, said he's openly discriminating against whites in the hiring process. No matter how great they look on paper, they don't fit well with my team. Abby Velarde, director of casino marketing at MGM Springfield, told an undercover OMG journalist, I will purposefully look for those diverse-based hires. He also revealed MGM closely tracks the racial makeup of its workforce, with the HR providing monthly reports. How disgusting. That's got to be a violation of non-discrimination laws, which are going to apply to discrimination against whites as much as they do to discrimination against blacks. Meanwhile, and this ought to be sobering, Paul Craig Roberts, an analysis of EMP attack on the U.S. power grid and critical national infrastructure. Stephen Starr is an expert knowledge about high-altitude electromagnetic pulse. His analysis leads him to the conclusion that an opponent doesn't need a large number of nukes to destroy the United States. 3 will suffice. Starr's analysis will be considered controversial because it shows EMP to be a grave risk to the safety of nuclear power plants. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission, a captured agency, denies that EMP poses a threat because nuclear facilities do not want to be forced to spend lots of money to correct design flaws in their plants. EMP is considered a non-design basis event and was never considered in the design and construction of U.S. nuclear power plants, none of which were designed or retrofitted to be protected from EMP. And by the way, other studies I've seen suggest EMPs over the U.S., taking out our electrical grid, would lead to the death of 70% of the population by starvation within several months. Within a matter of months, 70% of U.S. citizens would be dead from starvation if we're hit with an EMP. Meanwhile, here's a report on the staggering salaries of Planned Parenthood executives. You didn't know they're being paid the big bucks? Hey, folks, listen up. We got some big news about Planned Parenthood that might make your head spin. A new report says that top bosses at Planned Parenthood are getting paid a whole lot more than most folks running other nonprofits out there. In fact, they're making more than 3 times the average salary. This report from American Life League came out talking about how these CEOs have been getting hefty pay raises over the last few years. Meanwhile, a lot of Planned Parenthood places are saying they're having money troubles. Imagine that. Back in 2020, a Planned Parenthood CEO is making around $317,564 Now it's jumped up to $352,661 in 2023. That's an 11% increase. And it's making you wonder where all this cash is really going. Meanwhile, Hillary, get this, demands Democrats use AI to control voters' thoughts. This is unbelievable. If you have any doubts about Hillary and whether she's really a monster, this ought to seal the deal. Twice failed Democrat presidential candidate Hillary Clinton spoke at the World Forum in Berlin, Germany, to discuss the future of democracy and artificial intelligence, where she calls for governments to weaponize AI against citizens of the world for the sake of controlling information. Information determines how we think, and how we think determines what we say, and what we say determines what we do, Hillary said. Clinton, who remains one of the most universally hated politicians in the world, goes on to imply that AI should be used to establish an agreed-upon truth that is used to, wait for it, protect democracy. The Democrat continues calling on countries to take risks with AI-powered censorship for democracy. If the past few years have taught us anything, it's when Democrats talk about democracy, they're speaking in code for the desire to maintain complete control. How could you have a better example? Meanwhile, Shredded bird order drops. Deep state cover-up launched. It's going on unabated. Sad to say. The Biden-era deep state is up to its old tricks again, but this time they're literally burning the evidence. A bombshell report reveals most top officials at the U.S. Agency for International Development ordered staff to shred and burn classified and personal documents, sparking serious legal and ethical concerns. Yes, but just imagine. They're willing to run the risk of destroying evidence because the evidence is so damaging to them. Meanwhile, here we have Patrick Lawrence on the Zionists within. During Donald Trump's first 4 years in the White House, the stranger to Washington's infernal ways got nothing done. The cabal of various deep state appendages, the Democratic Party's upper echelons, the intelligence apparatus, the Justice Department, the FBI, and corporate media made sure of that. Trump seems to have thought this through during the 4 years playing golf at Mar-a-Lago. He returned to the White House 2 months ago this week with a full-dress plan to get done what he couldn't first time around. And now look, Donald Trump, the subverted, we have to conclude, was better than Donald Trump, the empowered. Who'd have thunk it? The more Trump does this time around, the more one looks back with a weird fondness to the subterfuge of the Trump 1 regime, unlawful and corrosive of our ailing republic as all that was. Simplicius, the always stimulating commentator who takes his name from the 6th century Neoplatonist, posted an interesting summation of the present state of affairs the other day. Trump, he wrote, now wallows in a post-euphoric doldrum phase of his floundering second term when virtually every one of his campaign promises has faltered or flopped. Floundering presidents tend to make messes. The mess to which Simplicius refers concerns the Ukraine war and Washington's relation with Moscow. Ending the former, repairing the latter was the biggest of Trump's many big promises during last year's campaign. But he's been all over the place on this key issue. The man who stood squarely against the war has now resumed supplying Ukraine with weapons and battlefield intelligence. The past week he had Marco Rubio, who comes over more as a schoolboy than Secretary of State, offering Moscow a ceasefire deal with the Kiev regime as if either one laughs or does this other thing, the U.S. were an honest broker rather than the principal belligerent in the proxy war former President Joe Biden recklessly provoked. I'm sorry to say, I think that's right. Meanwhile, Israel killed JFK and stole the bomb. Here's a report about it. Let's see what it has to say.
Against a new world order.
An iron curtain has descended across the continent. Ladies and gentlemen, the United States stands at this time at the pinnacle of world power, an awe-inspiring accountability to the future.
A new problem emerged in peacetime. The weapons surplus across continents was no longer necessary. Some weapons used in the beginning of the war had been made obsolete and were replaced with more advanced models by the end of the war. Black markets for illegal as well as legal arms trades thrived.
Did you know The IRS publicly admits that income tax is collected by voluntary compliance. Get the information you need to help you avoid income tax with these 5 easy steps. All you have to do is go to avoidincometax.com to get your 5 easy steps on how to avoid the IRS income tax. Escape the IRS. Let avoidincometax.com help you. We guarantee our 5 easy steps or your money back. Go to avoidincometax.com.
Eleanor Rigby picks up the rice in the church where a wedding has been. Lives in a dream, waits at the window, wearing the face that she keeps in a jar by the door. Who is it for? All the lonely people. Where do they all come from? All the lonely people. Where do they all be?
2 final stories. Did Israel kill the Kennedys? By Lawrence Goyer. This is back on June 3rd, 2018, but surely worth a read. Introduction. Just after midnight, June 6, 1968, Senator Robert Kennedy was assassinated in a back room of the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. He had just been celebrating his victory in the California primary, which made him the most likely Democrat nominee for the presidential election. His popularity was so great that Richard Nixon on the Republican side stood little chance. At the age of 43, Robert would have become the youngest American president ever after being the youngest attorney general in his brother's government. His death opened the way for Nixon, who could finally become president 8 years after having been defeated by John F. Kennedy in 1960. We know Jack had been assassinated 4.5 years earlier, and the question is, how big a role did Israel have? And I'll tell you, it did have a significant role, but the primary mover, the inspiration for the assassination, was Lyndon Johnson. Here we have a story about Skull and Bones, the elite society controlling the world.
For centuries, secret societies have fascinated and frightened people alike. From the Knights Templar to the Freemasons, these shadowy organizations have shaped history from behind the curtain, influencing governments, banking systems, and even revolutions. Their members are bound by oaths of secrecy, their motives often unclear, leaving the public to wonder, are they merely social clubs for the elite, or do they wield real power? One such society has stood the test of time, remaining one of the most exclusive and powerful organizations in America. Its members have gone on to become U.S. presidents, Supreme Court justices, intelligence operatives, and corporate titans. Its rituals, a closely guarded secret, rumored to involve coffins, stolen skulls, and strange oaths of loyalty. For nearly 200 years, Skull and Bones has operated in the shadows at Yale University. But what really happens inside the infamous tomb? Does this fraternity hold more influence than it wants the world to believe? Today, we uncover the truth about Skull and Bones. Hello.
This is definitely worth watching. It's only 16 minutes, but it's very, very good. Be right back and take your call.